Thank you, Diwan, and thank you everybody for coming. I am a research associate with MERICS, where I work since last summer, and I mainly deal with cybersecurity, but also with questions of internet governance, so the more international question of how China deals with the internet. Apart from that, I do that as a part-time position. I've been working with Reporters Without Borders in Germany for 3 years, and I still do, where I work on online freedom and where I worked a lot on the topic of German and European companies exporting surveillance technologies all over the world, and worked with many NGOs and also with government to create a law that basically controls the export of this technology. So this is the other side of what I'm doing. So today I want to talk about China's cybersecurity strategy, and actually I would say it's a relatively new situation that we can actually speak about a cybersecurity strategy. In my experience, the word cybersecurity is very badly defined, and a lot of people use this term for very different things and very different reasons. And so from our understanding here in Germany, I would say one big part is the question of data security. So is data, can you keep your data private if you want it? Is your data available when you need it? Can you do this at a reasonable cost, right? So this is, I think, one of the most basic definitions. And then there's one definition that I also find quite useful that comes from a user perspective and from a human rights perspective, and actually says cybersecurity is the ability to communicate fearlessly online. Right? So if you send an email to your friend and you can have a reasonable feeling that it's not going to be hacked, you probably feel good about it, right? If you put data in your iCloud account and you know it's not going to be hacked, and this is probably not true anymore, then you will comfortably do so, right? But this, I would say, is more or less comprises the more Western definition of cybersecurity. In China, I see that things are different. We have a lot of desire, of course, in China to control information. And so internet censorship is one big part of Chinese cybersecurity policy. Then a relatively new situation that we have is that we have a centralized leadership and decision-making in internet affairs, cyber affairs in China. And then we have a third component, which is secure and controlled technology. So we see that the Chinese government has a desire to not only control information, but also understand and control the technology that runs the information, that transmits it, that is being used to process it. I must say, in this regard, the Chinese government actually is very forward-thinking in thinking about how digitalization works, how digital technology works. Most of us would agree, I think, that they do draw the wrong conclusions from what they know. So in these three parts, centralized leadership, secure and controlled technology, and information control together constitute a concept that is now being arising and that's now mentioned by Lu Wei and by other people in the government, called digital sovereignty. And then, of course, we also have this traditional definition of information security, cybersecurity that I pointed out, that is also part of this overall complex. Then I want to talk a little bit about the so-called Central Internet Security and Informatization Leading Group, which is a very specialized format, which is headed by Xi Jinping himself, and which brings together a lot of experienced policymakers and also other experts from within the party offices and within the government. And so we see that we have a very wide body that has the support of the top leadership. And so they give policy guidelines, or what you may call a cybersecurity strategy. And this body, which is not an official government body, right, is supported by the State Council Internet Information Office or Cyberspace Administration of China. And this body used to be only a very small office in the State Council Information Office, but now it's been expanded. And so this means we have a lot of leadership from the top. And before we had this group, we had different ministries pushing their own IT security standards. To the situation that if you were an IT company in China and you want to sell to the government, you probably need 3 or 4 different licenses or security certificates, which is of course very costly and a lot of hassle, and you don't want to do that. And so now this new leading group is trying to clear up this space and to push for a more coordinated effort. So we have a couple of bodies that are more from the party side. One of them is the Central Commission for State Secrets. In the past years, they were mostly running the archive of the party and also doing classification work. But now they're very active also in this new domain, also defining security standards. And then we have the Central Encryption Leading Group, which is a body that basically develops and rates encryption standards. And importantly, they have a general key to basically every Chinese encryption standard. They hold it, and if the government needs it, they can come and unlock it. Chinese companies have some restrictions on using foreign encryption standards, so they can only use it when they can prove they need it to communicate with Western partners. For Western companies, the standards are not so strict, so they can usually bring their own encryption, RSA, or whatever they use internationally, bring it to China and then use it. We have also the Ministry for Public Security, Gong'anbu, which is running the classified information networks of the government, and which also works in a scheme called the Multi-Level Protection Scheme that I will talk about in a minute. And then we have the MIIT working with the private IT industry to work on standardization mechanisms a lot. This term secure controlled technology, or also this multi-level protection scheme, so what does it mean? It basically means that the Chinese government cannot buy computers with Windows 8 anymore. It means that Chinese banks and financial institutions until 2019 have to use 75% Chinese technology, and that they should annually report on their progress that's being made. It means that a lot of companies in strategically important sectors and big state-owned enterprises cannot use Kaspersky antivirus anymore. And it means that also there are now restrictions in some areas whether you could buy a server from IBM or if you should buy a server from China. So restrictions have in theory been in place for a couple of years, but now they're being enforced more and more. And of course one can say that it makes sense to a certain degree for the Chinese government to not use Windows computers, right? So especially after what we see from all these Snowden leaks, I would also be afraid of being spied upon as a foreign government when I use basically their operating system. We have 5 levels that this scheme defines. So the first level is private users, and there are basically no restrictions that says, okay, private users should take care of their own security. Maybe they install a virus scanner and they don't do bullshit online, right? Then the second level would be small and medium enterprises that have no connection to national security, and they can also basically do whatever they want. And then it gets interesting on the third level, where strategically interesting companies would come into play. They cannot use like some software, but they can, for example, use Windows still. And then 4 and 5 is government levels, and they have the toughest restrictions. Okay, and then I said internet censorship is also a part of cybersecurity in China. It's decreasing security standards for companies and for private people in the whole internet, because some technologies cannot be used when you employ DNS censorship, for example, or other things. Also, of course, usability goes down quite a bit, especially in international cooperation. And then you have a very high cost. So there was a study from Gary King and some people at Harvard, and they tried to figure out how many people social network in China needs to employ for adequate censorship. And they said for 50,000 users they need 2 to 3 people for censorship. So for Sina Weibo this would mean to employ around 15,000 people just as a comparison, Facebook globally has 9,000 employees, right? Recently, also for foreign companies, this is now a major obstacle of doing business in China. The traditional sphere of information security, I would say, we still have a lot of security risk in mobile apps. Especially a lot of Chinese app stores are not good at checking for viruses and so on. And then when you see that people in China now use mobile payment and all this a lot, this can have, of course, very bad consequences. The security of individual users is not the focus of government policy in China, but it's more on this abstract spying level, and it's on this level to say we want to protect our own national champions and make them big. There's of course a criminal hacking scene in China, and in the West they usually operate in the Tor network, in the Silk Road that you may have heard about. Tor is not available in China mostly due to internet censorship, and so these kind of criminal people operate in open web forums, which I think is very interesting, because the government is able to basically delete critical remarks about Xi Jinping in minutes, but it's not cracking down on these kind of criminal behavior, even though it would have the capacity to do so, right? So maybe they're not interested in that. Thinking about security is always security for whom, from whom, in which situation, right? So it's very very granular to talk about security.